Welcome, everyone, to Rupp Falls Graphs, Empire State Entrepreneurs and New York Business Law Podcast, a fun and informative forum for us to feature our clients, strategic partners, community leaders, and team members to talk about relevant issues for entrepreneurs and business owners throughout New York. My name is David Fallsgraf, and I'm blessed to be the managing partner of Rupp Fallsgraf, a full-service law firm headquartered in Buffalo, New York, with offices in Rochester and Albany and soon to be New York City. And it's a real privilege for me to host this podcast. I wanted to first start by thanking Mike Narek, our great partners at INSEP, for hosting us in this super cool podcast space. My firm is using INSEP for a number of projects, and they're doing just a terrific job for us. Got an incredible, amazing, inspiring guest today, Juweria Dahir, the Director of Innovation and Entrepreneurship at the Buffalo Niagara Medical Campus. She's focused on local entrepreneurship and supporting small businesses, particularly among marginalized groups. And she has a really unique and compelling story to tell. So I'm so fortunate to be able to welcome her here today with us. Welcome.
Thank you. I'm so excited to be here.
And before we get into what you're doing today, which I think is very relevant for our entrepreneur listeners, I wanted to have everyone have a little bit of background because I think it's important in sort of telling your story. So I thought maybe you could walk us through your journey and what's sort of led you to this point today. And then we can get into some of the inspiring work that you're doing over at the medical campus.
Awesome. Thank you so much for that warm introduction. And thanks for having me, Dave. I really appreciate it. It's my first time. So I'm excited to hopefully come back again. Let's see. Where do I begin? So I am a Buffalo transplant. I'm not originally from Buffalo. I was born in East Africa, and it was in the 90s. And unfortunately, because of the Civil War, my parents had to flee. And they fled out of all places. They moved all the way to Switzerland. And I was a 2-month-old baby.
Wow.
So that's kind of where my story begins. And I was raised in rural part of Switzerland. I grew up in a small town called Männedorf, and Männedorf is part of Zurich. So I still speak Hochdeutsch, which is a type of German. And we lived there for almost 11 years. I went to kindergarten and my early years of school, and I had a really interesting and different childhood, and I really appreciate that.
It sounds like much different than mine, I can tell you that, but amazing.
Yeah. And then, honestly, I mean, and I'm just mentioning this because I've bounced around quite a few times, but it's nice to finally settle in a place I really call Buffalo home now, because I moved from Switzerland to Sweden eventually for many different reasons, primarily economic reasons. And then, so in Sweden, we lived in a small town again. My mother was a fan of small towns, never a big fan of big cities. Until eventually when we settled in the UK, and there we went to Birmingham, which is the second capital city, and they would pronounce it as Birmingham. But yeah, both of my parents are East African. My mother was a farmer, and part of the reason we always stayed in rural parts was so that she could farm. Unfortunately, she did, of course, meet different challenges that she had to experience. But outside of that, I mean, she was a fantastic mother. She raised all of us. And my father is a construction worker. And so he managed to launch his own business. And I think that's kind of where some of my entrepreneurial spirit comes from. And I think farming is really probably one of the best entrepreneurial skill sets you can have, or mindset, I would say. So yeah, I speak a few languages. I love to travel. But it's nice to finally be able to settle and call Buffalo home. So my husband and my kids are all here. And yeah, I'm here to stay now.
That's great to hear. We're fortunate to have you put a stake in the ground here in our community. So from East Africa to Switzerland to Sweden to Birmingham in the UK, what then prompted the move across the Atlantic to make it to the United States? When did that journey take place?
Sure. That took place January of 2013. So I'm here for about roughly 10 plus years, I think. Yeah, I met a guy. He said he was from New York. I guess he was from Buffalo, but and that's such a common story. So yeah, he said he was from New York, and he was doing a study abroad program at my university in the UK. And so we met, and he had never moved around as much as I did. So I think as soon as, our relationship developed and we ended up getting married, it made sense for me to be the person who packs up and moves again.
And your family has remained.
Yeah, my family has remained in the UK, but they constantly come. So I have a contract with my mother to come every single summer. So she spends every summer with us, and yeah, my siblings too.
That's great. Tell me what your reaction was like when you were told New York, but it was actually Buffalo, New
Oh my
York,
God.
and not Manhattan.
So so the first 2 years was very difficult, and a couple of my friends who still live in the UK actually think I live in the city, and I don't
I
even
believe
correct
it.
them anymore. Yeah. And I had a friend who once texted me and said, "Hey, Juweria, I'm in town. I'll be here. I'm in a marketing gig, and would love to grab coffee with you. Let me know." And so I sent her a screenshot of where I am. She said, "Well, I thought you lived in New York." I'm like, "I do." So
Um,
yeah, that's always complicated but fun to explain.
tell me about your first couple of years when you make the transition, leave your
hmm
family behind, leave everything you know behind to come to the United States and New York, and ultimately Buffalo, New York.
hmm
Talk me through what you were doing those first couple of years and some challenges that maybe you experienced.
hmm Okay. So the first couple of challenges that I experienced was really the transition from the university. Um, Even though England obviously is an English speaking country, once you transfer, you have to take basic classes like English 101 and 201. So when I transferred with my bachelor's degree, I had to take some basic gen eds, retake some English classes. And I thought that was just really strange because I was treated like an international student. And the one thing that I will say, however, that it helped me with was really understand American culture. We spent a lot of time watching Glee because you asked me for my challenge, and a big challenge was I really struggled with American humor. So I wouldn't get the jokes, and then if I made a joke, no one else in the room would get it, and that became I struggled with making friends and just overall building relationships. And so Glee really helped. um, English 101 helped. I also went through a 2 year of changing my accents. I used to say, "Can I get a glass of water?" And then it became, "Can I get a glass of water?" So I did that deliberately. Um, I just noticed that people were so fascinated by the accent and would leave and not pay attention to maybe the content of our conversation. And I didn't want that. I wanted to be more about what we were speaking of rather than, "Oh, where are you from?" and "What is this fancy accent?" And I'm like, "Oh, come on." Because in Europe, people speak multiple languages. And I felt like in the US, that wasn't as common. Or if it was just maybe one other language, whereas I speak four. And so, but other than that, I think the culture here is drastically different. I think the landscape, it just being so much bigger. I mean, I was used to getting in a car, traveling for 4 hours and being in a whole different country. And now 4 hours in, you're still in the same place.
You're
So
just beyond Rochester,
yeah,
hitting
so
Syracuse on your way to New
distance,
York.
housing, and I know we'll get into my background, but I had never seen abandoned buildings in my life because land is such a high commodity anywhere in Europe. And so to see something being vacant and not for sale and not for rent, I just thought that was very strange. I'm like, why is nobody grabbing this real estate, or why is it even available? So yeah, those were just some of the basics, but I've I really appreciated the transition, and because I've been able to adapt, I think now I feel like I'm part of the prosperity that we're seeing. Whereas in the UK, everything is already developed. I mean, it's already advanced.
Right, right.
So here, and I don't mean to say that we're not advanced. That's not my point. But there's a lot of work that we can still be part of.
I think it's interesting too, and it leaves an impact with me when you talk about sort of first impressions and having grown up myself in Buffalo, right up Delaware Avenue from here. you sort of become accustomed to your surroundings. And by that, it's interesting that you say just seeing vacant buildings in and
Mhm.
around the medical campus or out by the university or in the heart of downtown Buffalo.
Mhm.
I hate to say you become accustomed to when you grow up in this area, but I think what's so neat about the way Buffalo is experiencing this renaissance and sort of this rebirth is there are so many individuals who have come in from outside here. It's no longer a sort of a generational thing in Buffalo where people don't leave or people
Mhm.
don't come here, a dwindling population. I think your
Mhm.
perspective initial perspective as you transitioned here is interesting because things that you noticed would be things that maybe I would not notice. So that's
Mhm.
part of the benefit I think from having a more uh, diversified, population and
Mhm.
bringing in perspectives from the outside rather than this is the way it's always been done is
Absolutely.
really compelling and it's enriching to me and I think the community when you start getting outsiders' perspectives on
Mhm.
hey, we don't always have to do it this way, or maybe
Yep.
we could renovate as opposed to demolish. And here's
Mhm.
what I saw in Birmingham, or here's how I grew up in Africa. That
Yep.
those perspectives I think are so valuable. And I think for the
Mhm.
first time in a long time, we're seeing that our community is embracing and not shuddering from those perspectives and points of view.
Oh, yeah, absolutely. And just one last example, I thought technology was a big difference too. And what's interesting is when you're for someone who wasn't exposed to the United States of America, it's just through Hollywood. And through Hollywood, you would assume that the United States is the most advanced nation. And so when I came here and I wasn't able to transfer money as fast, or there was weird fees that I would have to pay if I went from one bank to another, I thought that was so strange because I had never dealt with that. In Somalia and Ethiopia and Kenya, they're all cashless. You just use your phone. And then in Europe, I mean, there's no fees. You can go to any bank and transfers, and it's so fast, and data sharing is fast. And so I think there's a few things that we can learn from them just to make sure that we're also catching up. But that was definitely another big challenge that I ran into.
The pace of change is remarkable, and
Mhm.
we're a little bit behind, I think, not only in this community but perhaps this country, and
Mhm.
adopting some of the things that are so natural and
Mhm.
in Europe, and I think we need thought partners and change agents
Mhm.
like you who are going to come in and say, "Have you thought about this? And should we be thinking about this differently?" So that
Yeah.
is just such an accelerant, I think, for some of the change that we need in this community. It's great to hear. I want to hear a little bit about. So you come to Buffalo,
Mhm.
and do you matriculate at the University of Buffalo, or you are a student for a period of time?
Yeah, so I transferred. So I started my bachelor's in the UK, and then so a bachelor's degree is 3 years in the UK, and so I had completed 2 years, and then the third year is when I transferred.
I
And I
see.
yeah, and so I did that primarily because had I graduated from the UK, you would still have to go back. You wouldn't be able to continue with a master's degree, unfortunately. But anywhere else in Europe, you would have, and so it made sense to transfer and then continue on. And I had to do about another 18 months. And that's where the gen eds and some of the other classes came in.
I see.
But that was very helpful because then I was qualified as a U.S. Individual with a bachelor's degree from the U.S. and I didn't have any hard time applying for my graduate school.
And I see you graduate or you graduated around what, 2015 or 2016?
Yeah, 2015, and then I went back right away for my master's
At the University of
at
Buffalo,
the University of Buffalo.
and that
Yes,
took another
that took another 2 years.
2 years. Okay,
Yep.
so in 2017, 2018, you find yourself
Hmm.
now, with firm roots in Buffalo,
Yeah.
raising a family, and what is your vision coming out, after getting your master's? How are you gonna
Hmm.
change the world, or what's your first idea of what would be, an impactful or a meaningful role for you, sort of with this
Yeah.
new sort of education and excitement about doing something?
Yeah. So the first thing I did, like I said, it was really challenging for me to understand the concept of vacant land, vacant lots, the difference here in culture, the challenges that we experience. Like in Europe, it's more of a social class divide. Here, it's more of a racial divide. So kind of understanding all of those root causes, and I really had never studied any American history. Um, I decided to pick up an internship. And where better to do an internship than city government, the most innovative place. And so I did that, and I did a program called the Mayor's Urban Fellow Program. And I don't remember which year this was, but I know I was still an undergrad. And it was a 6 months internship where I had an opportunity to just delve into kind of the challenges and the prosperities and the opportunities available here in Buffalo, why some neighborhoods look the way that they do, what the future of those neighborhoods can look like, what the future will look like if we don't make any changes, the population, the community, what their needs are, how government has been working, maybe where it's falling short. And I think that's really what opened up my eyes to understanding the community better. And I thought it was so important to understand from the governance side because too often it's usually we blame government for everything and anything. So I wanted to know what they had done and what policies had impacted the city. And so after that 6 months, they actually offered me a job right away. So I was very privileged for
Not
that.
surprising.
And I ended up staying there for 6 years. And I told them I would want to, I would have to go back to school, and they supported me and accommodated, and I'm so grateful to them. But my first research project at the city was I correlated data from streetlights that were going out, and um, the rate or the capacity that we quickly go and fix them. And so part of the issue is in city government, we have a number called 311. So if it's not 911, it's usually 311. That's kind of how you use the number. But when a street light in, say, a prosperous community in Delaware goes out versus in a distressed neighborhood, say in Maston Park, there isn't a priority mechanism. It's just a who calls in first, who reports in the issue, and then it gets fixed. And, you would think that's a fine kind of process. But the reality is, unfortunately, in distressed communities, more people are vulnerable, and chances are having that street light on or off could actually save a life, for instance. Or people are walking on the streets at night because they don't have public transportation or because they're disabled. And so making sure that you're more aggressive in a vulnerable community when the street light is out is so important. And then equally in a prosperous neighborhood too, but figuring out the priority based on how distressed the neighborhood.
That's
That's kind of what the
fascinating.
data statistic that I did. And I thought, I guess maybe they were impressed, and that's what kind of got me the job. I don't know. But I had a really good time with that project, and I learned a lot too. Yeah, and then the rest is history. I ended up sticking around for 6 more years.
Any highlights you can recall from that 6 year tenure with the city, or any accomplishments you're particularly proud of?
Yeah. Just really learning the community. I mean, I spent 6 years just listening, and it was 6 years of understanding. Um, and I don't think that's even enough, but it starts off with just listening because people have concerns. People know what solutions they want. And you start to understand, how to bring communities together, how to advocate for a policy, what's needed to push forward to have a policy. You start to think about the implementation of anything. And so I would really recommend anyone and everyone to start off in their early years to get an internship in city government, because you will deal with police and crime to housing to garbage to quality of life to legal. It's really anything and everything that impacts people in society. And so I think I was very fortunate. In terms of highlight, I think I'm a data person, so um, when we launched the open data portal, that was one of my biggest projects. And so the open data portal was so important because in government, they sit on so much data, and making sure that data was accessible and public is so important because that's how innovation is driven. So making that accessible means people can use it, can navigate it to actually solve public solutions. And that's what we saw. And this was a push from Bloomberg. And so Buffalo became a partnering city with Bloomberg Philanthropy. And myself and another city colleague spent 3 years traveling back and forth from Buffalo to New York City to figure out how we can implement our open data portal. And the project itself was called What Works Cities. And it was a combination between Harvard, Kennedy School, and John Hopkins. And oh my God. And I ended up, having an opportunity to go to the Bloomberg headquarters. And they have so much food in there. It's incredible.
That's awesome.
Yeah. So I think that was probably one of my biggest highlights.
It's ironic, I suppose, but you don't typically think of city government and innovation in the same breath. So it's nice to know that those transformations, those changes with individuals like you and some of the colleagues you were working with, and leaning on resources like Bloomberg or Harvard can actually help accelerate some of the innovation and entrepreneurship and changes within city government that
Hmm.
traditionally probably would have been a lot longer lead time on.
Yeah. And we were functioning like a cohort model. So each year they would bring on about 15 cities. And so it was ourselves, Jacksonville, even some cities from Canada. I met people from Winnipeg, which I had never heard of before, Saskatoon, probably the coldest place in the world. But that cohort model also allowed us to, the same way that small businesses or any entrepreneur wants to be in sync with other entrepreneurs and like-minded folks in government, the same thing happens, or should really be happening. And so that's really what helped to drive the innovation to open up our portal. And now, in a click of a button, you can download different data sets from 311 to crime data to street lights. You don't have to really call and ask for a FOIL request. You can pretty much download all of that information, put it in an app, or figure out, any solution that you'd like to create.
That's incredible.
Hmm.
That's so cool. Did
It really is.
and that experience then, I assume, led you to the Buffalo Niagara Medical Campus, or what was your
Yeah.
mindset when it came to the possibility of making a change from doing what you were doing?
Yeah, so my background is in architecture and urban planning, and so people and housing and policies, those are kind of like the three things that I really enjoy. I wasn't spending a lot of time with businesses. I feel like I was doing work around economic development, but it was at the 3,000 level. It wasn't really boots on the ground dealing with small businesses. And what really opened up my eyes was during COVID, because I transitioned during COVID. When COVID hits, and I live on Buffalo's west side, so there's a lot of small businesses there, and it's an up and coming neighborhood. We love it there, and a lot of those businesses were shut, right? And they didn't have any means to figure out what their reopening strategy would be, how they would make up some of the monies lost. They had fired a lot of people already, so there was a lot of challenges, and I just felt like I didn't have enough of the um, skills or knowledge to better serve them. And I had the urban planning from the policy side. I had the design side. I'm like, well, I need to know a little bit more. And so I spent some time working with the businesses, kind of working with them on their storefronts and the challenge that they were having, and some of the grants that were available. And so fast forward, I ended up picking up the phone, calling one of my mentors. I'm gonna give him a big shout out. His name is Jim Tanis, and he is with uh, the Prosperity Fellowship. And I had met him during my days at UB. And I said, hey, I've been here for about 6 years, and government is great, but I think I'm ready to do something different and I want to pivot. And I don't want to go into a private architectural firm. I'm not ready to start my own business right now. What do you think I should do? And immediately he said, well, you've got to meet Matt Enstis. That's kind of how that happened. He said, you've got to meet Matt Enstis. He's the CEO of the Buffalo Niagara Medical Campus. And originally, and Matt's probably going to kill me for saying this, I thought Matt was a scientist or a doctor. And I thought, well, that's silly. Why would I want to meet a scientist or a doctor? And I just kind of left it off. But somebody from Matt Enstis' office ended up contacting me. And I actually ignored the message because I'm like, oh, it's the scientist, and really, that's not my thing. Let me leave that. And 3 months went by, and then I got another message that said, hey, we'd like to schedule some time with you. And I thought, boy, he's going to be so disappointed when he notices I'm not a doctor or a scientist. They're really wasting their time. So I meet him, and it was like first thing in the morning. And I think I must have said like 8 o'clock in the morning, I'm available, because I really thought they wouldn't agree to that. And they agreed to that because Matt's available anytime. And then we met, and it was Matt and Kyrie Stevens. And I talked, and I had known Kyrie a little bit because he works at BNMC too. And they told me a little bit about the work they do at BNMC. And I said, well, that's not what I thought you guys did. I'm so glad we connected. And that's kind of really where the transition led to. Matt explained kind of his journey what he sees in the future of BNMC, the work that they do to support businesses. But I think it was really just his innovative mindset. And the sky was the limit. Like, it was just, you could do anything and everything you wanted to. And he was ready to make a difference. And he knew that it was through empowering businesses. And I felt the same because of what happened during COVID. I had done a lot of work on housing. I had done a lot of work on eliminating poverty. I'm like, I've got to work on building wealth and figuring out how to get people to build wealth. So I have to be in the entrepreneurship side of work. And so, of course, once you speak to Matt, I mean, it's a game changer. So
100%.
I'm
What
so
an
grateful to him.
like an uncanny partnership that then was developed. And
Mhm.
when you think about a medical campus, but sort of thinking more differently than the way you'd think of a traditional medical campus, and Matt's pushing his vision for entrepreneurship and small
Absolutely.
businesses in the East Side, and
And
uh,
even like, big companies as big as 43 North started out at BNMC, and then smaller companies like Greg Crenshaw that just do buffalo chicken and waffles, they're also at BNMC, or started out, I should say. So yeah, I totally agree. It's the majority and the diversity of those businesses, the scale of them, and what's great is that they're Buffalo-based businesses and they're staying here locally.
tell me, so, and I want to build on that point,
Mhm,
but through sort of your work with IC Success
mhm.
and sort of this business entrepreneurship program, how has your role evolved since that kickoff coffee date with Matt Enstis, and sort of having a blank canvas when it came to how your role was going to be put together? Walk us through those couple of years that you've been there now, and what initiatives you've worked on, and what traction you're finding.
Mhm. So BNMC, just for any of our listeners who are not familiar, we're 640 Ellicott. We're in downtown, and we're a conduit of all the organizations and entities that are there. So between Kaleida, Roswell, JI, BNMC is really the kind of managing partner for all of those organizations. We bring them together, and our goal is really to focus on four pillars. One of them being transportation. So really thinking about different modes of transportation, equity around transportation. So there's some exciting projects that are going to be coming, whether that be shuttles and self-driving buses that we're going to hear from end of this year. But transportation and co-sharing is so important. So that's one of our big pillars. Our second work pillar really is focused around health and well-being, because people often think of the medical campus as a place where they come to when they're sick. And we want them to think of it as a place where you come for well-being. So not just when you're sick, because there's, over 17,000 people that work there. So making sure that all of those employees and the residents of the community that live around that neighborhood can benefit from programming, well-being activities, so that they can be preventative before they actually get sick, and think of the medical campus just as a sick institution. So that's the other parts. And then the third pillar is really the district. So we manage it from parking to streetscape to landscape, all of that make the campus very viable. And then the final one is the innovation pillar. And so that's where we focus on all of the entrepreneurial, the innovation work. And it's not just businesses in terms of small businesses, but really anyone that has an idea. Creators, designers, people can just come meet with us, and we support. And then we find partners like yourselves and others that really want to have an impact. So that's kind of the conduit of the company itself. And I think I lost the question that you had
Just
asked.
about, so you're touching a lot of different areas within the Buffalo Niagara Medical Campus community, and sort of by extension through the greater community.
Mhm,
I'm curious too, on the innovation piece. You and Matt, I believe, developed this accelerator program, and
mhm.
I'd love for our listeners to hear a little bit about how that accelerator has evolved, and what traction you've been able to see with some small businesses who
Yeah.
have been fortunate to have mentorship and financial investment and other resources. But how did that accelerator program get
Mhm.
launched, and what has become of it today?
Yeah. So, I mean, in terms of the work that we've done with businesses, that's kind of long standing. It's been over 10 plus years. So we've been doing a lot of work around that. And I think it's just been a little informal structured, where we would have one-on-one consultation, but it wasn't so much at a program level. And so one thing that I noticed that BNMC does really well is we find partners. And so if we feel like we're kind of not where we want to be, we find other organizations that we can partner with. And so whether that be local partners or national partners. And back in 2021, Matt and the team had decided to partner with a national company to learn more about other business accelerators that are thriving. So there's some really good ones in Massachusetts, in Atlanta, and really around the country. And what better to, instead of reinventing the wheel, to learn from them and then have your offshoot here in Buffalo. And so that's kind of how it got started. And I came at a really good pivotal time because it was the crest of COVID, things kind of starting to open up again, people wanting to see something different. Business is really in dire need of programming, educational support, of course, capital. And as soon as that partnership was established, I came on the team. I was appointed as the executive director. I ended up leading a business accelerator program where we bring in 15. We accept about 15 entrepreneurs, 15 businesses, all ideas, all business stages, and we match them up with mentors. We afford them seed funding. They go through a pitch contest. But what's really unique is the family dynamic that they become part of because it's so easy to go through a program and it just turns into a participation credit. But having a small, purposeful cohort of 15, not only is it small and mindful, but it gives you an opportunity to really get to know your fellow cohort members and have and foster a relationship. So that way you can actually ask them questions when you're stuck and really do life with them. And so we did that for about a year. And after a year of testing, we learned a lot. And so complementing it with the years of work that we had done, plus this 1 year of the national partnership, we decided to then launch IC Success. And I think it's probably been one of the best and most successful programs in the city. And I say that because I've heard people tell me that. And it's working because the community is supporting it. It's working because we have partners who help us. I'm going to give a big shout out to Josh, who's here from the firm. And congratulations, because he just got married. I know that. Josh has been a mentor, for instance. He's also come and taught some of our legal classes because our curriculum is developed to the point where anyone at any business stage can benefit from it. And it's usually the early stages. So we go through our customer segment, our value prep, the legal and all the nuts and bolts of business, but we don't bring in the same instructors. We bring in partners and instructors that can come and really teach from a deeper dive. And so Josh was able to do that, and he's super cool and funny. So I know he made a lot of good relationships there. And we're grateful to be able to do that because it enhances the community also. Because then now, for example, if they want to have a relationship with a bank, they see the bank a little different. When a speaker from the bank comes and they're able to forge a relationship. Same thing with a law firm. Same thing with an insurance company. A lot of businesses don't even realize at what point they should be insured. When should they be seeking legal counsel? Should they be signing a contract on their own? All of those small factors, things that can really save them time and money. We go over that. And I think Josh did a great job going through that in our previous cohort. And hopefully when he hears this podcast, it'll remind him to come to our next cohort too.
That's great. That's a very nice shout out to one of our great up and coming associate attorneys, Josh Retzer. And so I appreciate the partnership that we've been able to have and ways in which we can work together and see some of the great outcomes that can happen when you do that. As part of that program, or even separately and distinctly from your observations around the medical campus and your work in the community and with IC Success, I want to hear a little bit about empowerment and the importance of empowerment and inclusivity. I really look up to you as sort of a community leader and someone who can effectuate change quicker than normal. And so I'd love for our listeners to understand and appreciate a little bit your hard work in those areas as well, empowering people and businesses and sort of this mindset of being inclusive rather than exclusive as you're working on these different initiatives.
Oh, thank you. You're so kind. I guess the first thing I think about is the definition of entrepreneurship. Oftentimes, people have an image of what the entrepreneur should look like, and that's where the challenge starts. And so, in a lineup of people, if we still focus on what the person should look like, we lose out on seeing what the person is really capable of and what they can do. So that's really where it starts, the definition of entrepreneurship, because there is no single image of an entrepreneur. Um, so dismantling that idea. And so I think like for instance, the companies that I see coming into our program, they have, sometimes they've got two businesses, multiple businesses. It starts out as a side hustle, and then they're able to turn that into full time. They've got children, others don't. Some live in the basement of their parents, and some don't. But it's not the typical, I went to an Ivy League school and I have an ability to, kickstart my business because I got a $2 million loan from my parents. It's really not. It's folks that really, really want to build wealth and they want to see their kids benefit from it. They want to be able to sometimes come out of poverty, or they want to be able to not just rely on a 9 to 5. There's multiple reasons. Or sometimes it's just that their idea is so great that it's really going to just help solve so many pressing problems. So the definition of entrepreneurship is really important for me. And I think it's getting better. We're not stuck on this silo of here's what the entrepreneur should look like, but we're becoming more open minded. I think the second thing is programs can't work in silos. So, we run a program called IC Success at BNMC. But in addition to that, there's other programs that we also run. And we're going to be launching one called IC4, which is really to support the mid tier businesses to get them to the $1 million. And so that's just a small teaser. But other companies all around the city, whether it's, Launchpad or Pathstone, you name it, we try to work in collaboration with all of them, because if we can't work with the company or the business, we want to make sure they're not leaving their dreams behind and they're finding an entity that can still support them. So that's very important, just making sure that we connect those dots. And I think we've got to strengthen our relationship and come out of this competitive nature of it's just my way or the highway, or programs working independently. Because the typical entrepreneur, if you ask them, hey, is there enough programs here in Buffalo? They're going to tell you no. And there's a ton of them, but we're still in silos, and we've got to make sure we're so connected so that we can really service the entrepreneur better.
I think that's such a good point to break down those barriers
Mhm.
and the challenges that an entrepreneur faces, and it's not just the education, but it's the empowerment and it's
Yep.
it's collaboration and forced collisions, and I
Mhm.
think that's such an important point, and that I'm
Yeah.
sure will resonate with our listeners. On that note, I'm certain that you're proud of many of the entrepreneurs and businesses that you've worked with in the last couple of years through the accelerator, through IC Success. But can you give our listeners an example of a family or a business where you felt that you individually or that we collaboratively as a community were able to sort of help them pick themselves up with from their bootstraps and
Mhm.
get some traction that might otherwise not have been possible without Matt's original vision and the work that you're doing and your colleagues are doing on the campus. Is there a company or two or an individual or two where you smile when you think about them?
Oh my God. You're going to get me in trouble now because I can't leave any of them out. It's a laundry list, but I'll highlight maybe one or two. And the first person that comes to my mind is Greg Crenshaw, because I know I mentioned the chicken and waffle earlier. Um, so I met Greg Crenshaw. Well, I knew his uncle, and I met Greg Crenshaw back in 21. And Greg I believe he was either laid off from his job, or he was just transitioning out. I can't remember, but it was something to do with COVID and him not having that job anymore. But his grandmother had a really good recipe for making chicken and waffle. And during that time when he left his job, he started cooking. And it started out him just cooking for his family and friends, and they kept demanding for more and more. And he said, well, I should start charging you guys. And so he did. And he started charging them, and he got to the point where he was making $3,000 a week. And he thought, well, this is crazy. I have never run a business. I probably should start thinking about that. And this is just him kind of word of mouth through Facebook, selling to friends and family, and then them, sharing it with their friends and family. And so he applied through our program. And in the application, he had put down $0 in revenue. Okay. And I thought it was just so odd that he put down $0 in revenue. And I remember interviewing him, and the first questions I asked was, well, has anyone told you your food is great? Like, why is nobody paying for it? And because I said, it says $0 on your revenue. And he leaned forward and he said, that's because I only take cash. And that's the problem. I need to be part of a program. I can't get a loan now. And, short term, he thought he was really doing something great by taking cash. And now at a point where he's ready to have a food truck or, get a loan, he's not able to do that. And so this is unfortunately, a very common issue for many small businesses. And especially if you're in a community where you're the first person who started a business, and folks around you don't have that legal counsel or other entrepreneurial skills to support you in the way that you really need, you're going to make those mistakes. You're going to make those mistakes that could really take up so much time and money. And so he's the type of candidate that I now say is incredible to see where he started. He's now over, he has his own storefront. You can order his food through Uber, through DoorDash, and he didn't have any of that. Obviously, he's got a good bookkeeping system now. You
Incredible.
can pay in so many different ways. And he's had fantastic mentors that really probably would never have met him before. David Reading from KeyBank is one of his mentors. And right on when he left his house, he was actually cooking out of the basement in a church in Bailey. And that's how he got started. And his mentors visited him there, and really to see his vision to then be able to have that food truck. He's working towards the food truck goal, but he has a storefront now. It's just so fantastic, and he's doing amazing. And he's got the best chicken and waffle in town. It's Crenshaw Chicken and Waffle. So
That's
that's one.
incredible. I hope he's willing to cater for a law firm like mine. It sounds
Oh,
like we
he
need to bring
should.
him in tomorrow.
Okay, I'm gonna leave you some information with you.
That's awesome. Tell
Oh,
me, and I think building on that
yeah.
answer, Juweria, about, I was going to ask sort of as we begin to wrap up, but advice. You've seen a lot now
Mhm,
for small business owners like Greg, for entrepreneurs. Any advice that you would give to those individuals as to things you've seen or ways in which they can, sort of accelerate the building of their business? What a couple pieces of advice for our small business owner, entrepreneur listeners, and
mhm.
anything that you can give them as sort of something to take away.
Yeah, something that you had said earlier on, it's, just because something is being done, don't assume that it's being done the best way or is being done the right way. So just being open-minded to dismantle, to pivot, to really start from scratch again. Like, don't be afraid to do that. It'll save you time and money eventually. Better do it now than 5, 10 years from now. And then the second advice is really entrepreneurship is so isolating. And if you don't find a community to be a part of, you're going to have to constantly reinvent the wheel. You're going to have to constantly figure things out on your own. And that's not sexy and it's not fun. So definitely find yourself a community. IC Success is definitely one you can be a part of, or here at the BNMC. And if it's not us, find yourself another community you can be a part of. And then the final one I would say is mentorship. You have to be coachable, and you've got to have that coachability mindset. Regardless of how great you are at your business, as you are as a person, there's always something that you can learn. And so have a mentor that's outside of your circle, have a mentor that's outside of your field, have a mentor that's younger than you, if anything, have a mentor that's older than you, whatever that might be, have multiple mentors and just be open minded to constantly be coachable.
I think that's such good advice. I know early on in our podcast, you mentioned as you got into the U.S. and got into New York and got into Buffalo, you took a lot of pride in being a very good listener, and to me that is such a valuable trait and characteristic as you begin to learn a craft or become an expert at something. Being open-minded to feedback, constructive and positive feedback, so just exactly what you were saying about listening, being an active listener, and also being very open-minded about embracing mentorship and mentors, important mentors in your life, and then actually listening to what they say and
Mhm.
taking that constructive feedback to heart. I think you begin to see change happen in very positive ways when you let your guard down and become vulnerable
Mhm.
and seek out advice and information from other people who have been down that road before. I think that's such good advice for
Mhm.
a young business owner or an entrepreneur who's looking to get traction with his or her business. So that's
Mhm.
terrific. Well, I'll let you go in a minute, but I like to end these podcasts with something that I call the lightning round, and just a couple of quick questions so we can
Yeah.
get to know you a little bit better. Any hobbies that we need to know about you, Juaria, that we wouldn't otherwise know? Anything you're passionate about
Mhm.
outside your professional life or work?
I love ice skating. Um, in Sweden, when during the cold season, we would just skate over the lake. I don't do that anymore, but I love ice skating. That's definitely a big hobby of mine.
And what about travel? Any trips planned anywhere you've been or recommend that all of
Yeah.
us take in someday?
Oh my God. So I just came back from a 3-week vacation. I was in Saudi Arabia, which was a 12-hour flight. We had a great time. My family and I, they traveled for the first time. I had been there a few times, but I missed the warm temperature. We're back in brutal cold now.
Well, on that note, we like to thank our guests, and so I have a little
Aw,
branded hat for you that you
thank
can
you.
take with
Oh,
you
that's
and
perfect.
have one of your family members wear if you want. And then we've got a little coffee travel mug for you. So
Oh,
I
thank
can't
you.
begin to thank you enough for your insight today, your time. You just have such an incredible, inspiring story. I wish we could clone you and have 10 of you running around our community, effectuating the change that you're doing seemingly with ease. And we know there's a lot of hard work that goes in behind what you do. And we're fortunate to have you in our community and look
Oh,
forward to seeing many great things in the
thank
days
you.
and months and years to come. So thanks again for joining us.
Thank you so much. And I'm so grateful for your partnership. I wish we could clone you and all of your law firm because we really need more of you.
Oh,
So
that's
thank you
great
so
to hear.
much. I
Thanks
really
so
appreciate
much.
that.
And once again, on behalf of this Rupp Fallsgraf Empire State Entrepreneurs and New York Business Law Podcast, can't begin to thank you enough. Juweria, Dahir, you're doing so much in our community. I just would encourage you to keep your hard work up and keep your motivation, keep smiling, keep creating positive outcomes, and keep motivating and inspiring all of us. Your work is unique and it's so appreciated. Thank you.
Thank you for this opportunity.
All right, that's a wrap.
Aw, this is great. I get a gift live. I love it.
That was fun. I felt more relaxed. Yeah.